to pop back. There you are. I got you now. Hello, sir. How are you?
My first live, so I'm a
Really?
rookie
Are you
here.
serious?
Yeah.
Oh
I've
man, I
only been
love
doing this since I think I've been this like June.
really.
So
You have
yeah.
a great following. I love your content. Absolutely. I mean, I resonate with all of it 100%. So
It picked up so quick and people asked me questions about like TikTok stuff and I said, I don't even know, man. I'm clueless. Like when you
so
gonna go live? I don't know, soon.
that's awesome. So can you start out by telling us a little bit about yourself? How you got here on TikTok? Your life experience. How you ended up here tonight?
Short version I guess is the I'm not always as intense as I might look in those videos, but that's pretty much me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And so people would always be like, "Hey, you should get a TikTok account." And I had an Instagram account for my illustration work a few years ago. So basically, I'm social media um, newbie overall. Don't have Facebook or anything. So yeah, long story short, people said, "Why don't you take what you do, the stories you tell, and these things, go do on TikTok." So I did one account just fooling around at first, and I was just pulling clips. I never didn't do any of my own content,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess I had a good knack for I was doing a lot of Jordan Peterson stuff and some other motivational, just playing around, and that got up to about 200,000 likes. Am I saying that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I got banned for something I don't know. Um, Jordan Peterson stuff. I mean, okay. And then a couple more accounts I was playing around, and so I thought, all right, I'm going to do my own thing. And so right about June, maybe early July, um, and each time I got banned, by the way, and I never
Really?
did know why. But I don't know. But and I wasn't like doing crazy stuff. It was I don't know, like Jordan Peterson. They start talking about some controversial stuff, and I think what it was, I posted some interviews with Rogan and Robert Malone during all
Mm.
the
Yep.
COVID stuff, and so
Yep.
they didn't like that so much.
Yep. Yeah.
Lessons learned.
Their version of misinformation.
Yeah, yeah.
So are you married? Kids? All that stuff?
I was married for 22 years, and I'll get into that detail since the topics we talk about. But
Mm-hmm.
basically, I got married late 20s and um, got divorced 2 years ago. None of it was awful, or basically, we just got married too soon.
Yep.
Not that compatible. A lot of the content I get into isn't always directly to her because I'm never going to talk about the mother of my children in a bad way. And again,
Yep.
she wasn't awful. It was just, it didn't work.
Yep.
And so we stayed together as long as we did for the kids, and kind of typical story.
Yep.
Um, but beyond that, I had, well, I guess given the topics and stuff, basically, I'll get into some of this, wouldn't normally be relevant, but as a young man, dating and girls and all that came easy. Not because I know what I was doing, I didn't, but I would do pretty well, and then I'd fail spectacularly,
Yeah.
and then I was just cocky enough, I would just keep trying. And my first really big video on here was just me telling bartender stories, and I was I had gotten banned again. I'd started this account here, and I'd had a small handful of videos, and I was literally just walking around with the camera right where I'm at right now, and I was grilling steaks, and I just kept coming back, and for some reason I thought to tell these bartending stories, and the reason those stories stood out in my mind is because I was 21, and I'd been around. I wasn't naive or too wet behind the ears, but to be 21 in this, it was in the Goat Hill Tavern. It's a big popular place there in Southern California. Short version again is even at 21, when you think you know something, and all of a sudden you're exposed to reality,
Yeah.
and you're just watching people fly on the wall. And I was just daily just floored by the things people would say to you. And a lot of people in the comments were either hairdressers or other bartenders, um, nurses, a lot of different positions where people don't think of you so much as a person.
Yeah.
So anyway, I made that one, and that's I think like 6 million or something now, 1.7.
That's awesome.
And so that got some momentum going. And so then I was like, okay, now what? And yeah, so here I am, you know.
Well, I think that's funny
Oh,
because my most viral video was on the masculine feminine dynamic, and it's pinned on my TikTok page about she's in her masculine because you're not providing a safe place for her to be in her feminine, and that ruffled a lot of feathers. I mean, that between the two videos that I made on there, the original video and then the one that I made a sound, it's like almost up to 5 million views or something like that, and people really took that to heart. Like they really don't A, understand the masculine feminine dynamic, and B, understand if you're going to apply gender roles, especially traditional gender roles, to the masculine feminine dynamic, what that actually looks like and
yeah.
how we're supposed to show up as men and how women are supposed to show up as women. So if you want to touch on that, if you want to jump right into it, what is wrong with men today, or what is wrong with masculinity today in a traditional form?
You know, picking up kind of where I was talking about, I did well with women at a young age. Now, maybe I shouldn't even say well. I just was kind of, I
You were
guess,
sought out.
you know, it's just kind of, and I'm being very sincere here. It's really winning life's lottery, you know, because I know there's a lot of guys out there who would struggle for a date, and I could get dates, you know, not because I knew what I was doing, and that leading into more the point of then I get married, and I got into church pretty heavy for a while. I still have my spiritual beliefs. Well, I'm not quite as religious as I once was. Nothing against church. I'm not one of those people that talks about spirituality while putting church down. That's not me.
Yeah.
Um, Different story, different time. Anyway, so I actually spent some time in the pulpit and getting to know people from that level, if that makes sense. And so I had to work with a lot of people, and I was observing a lot of things. And so from my kind of wild bad boy beginning, and then that sort of what would you call it, a reformed bad boy. Now I'm in church, even in the pulpit, and then I watched my marriage kind of dissolve. And it was never big fights. It wasn't any one big thing. And there's all these dynamics of the masculine and feminine, like we're talking about going into that.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched the ex-wife just get bored, you know, and it was kind of disconcerting to watch. And fast forward to the future, now I'm suddenly single. So I'm single in 1998 and again in 2020. That was pretty big sea change there. And
Yeah.
tried the dating apps for a little bit, and maybe it's local. I live in a smallish city, 120,000 people or so. Wasn't a lot to choose from. I'm not passing opinions on dating apps, but where I'm at, not good. Um, so long story short to all that, to get to the masculine and the feminine, is I'm an observant guy. I mean, I hope none of this sounds like I'm thumping my chest, but I can do the content that I do because I'm observing. I'm a reader. I started reading psychology books in my teens. I make observations, and I feel like I've been taking notes all this time. And then when I find myself single again in 2020, and I kind of know what's going on out there, you know, you hear about dating apps and you hear about all this stuff that's on the platforms, and then you get into it and you're like, oh, okay, I see. And
Yep.
so that's kind of where half the content I get into hasn't really happened to me. You know, I hear what's one topic that comes up? Talk about some of these controlling women. I did a stitch with another woman who I'm now pretty good friends with here, um, Dr. Elizabeth Princeton. She's pretty good. She was talking about ball buster women. And I did a post and I said, look, guys, you shouldn't be on a second date with this woman, you know, that kind of woman, much
Mm-hmm.
less, you know, a long relationship. And so I have not been in a lot of relationships like that, but I know what I'm looking at. I've seen that.
Yep.
And then that feeds into the larger question of what you were saying, you know, what about men and women? What's going on? Um, so I think that gets to kind of a central theme on my end is I don't think there's anything wrong with men or women per se. Something's drastically wrong with society,
Mm-hmm.
and not some kind of conspiratorial way. We can get into the ascension, peak, and decline of societies, all that kind of stuff. But in the last 50, 60 years, things are just falling apart.
Yeah.
And just like everything else in this country and in the world, I guess, everything's divided now. They had political divisions 100 years ago, but the average people on the street weren't that divided. Now
Right.
everything's divided. So, and just the way I look at it, and the reason I push against a lot of the lingo that's out there is I don't think we have male and female problems. They may manifest different ways for the masculine and the feminine, but I don't think we have male and female problems. We have a societal problem, and we're divided down the middle just like we are in so many other areas.
Yeah.
And so some of the things I get on, excuse me, some of the things I get on, I hear other like red pill type people talking about, excuse me, and what they'll do is they'll pick up on some negative on a female and then they really dig in. And I don't think that really helps. It just creates an argument, muddies the water. So there's things I get on. I'm not going to go down all these different paths. What's the topic I'm on? And I try to stay on that topic. So if it's like men do this, women do that, whatever, hey, men behave such and such, get your act together, this kind of thing. But so I think at the end of the day, my focus is more like everybody wake up. Men are men, women are women. Everybody kind of come back together and
Yep.
quit blaming everybody.
Yep.
Quit blaming everybody else.
So I want to stop real quick. Anybody who's in here with questions, we're going to talk a little bit, then we'll stop and take questions. Wendy is monitoring the questions, and she'll text them to me, so I will not miss your questions. I will get to them, but we want to talk for a little bit. But we will get back to you. And a lot of the things that you guys are mentioning, we will get to. I have a couple of notes here of things that I do want to ask Ray that I think he's really going to have some great insight on. So if we don't get to that, we'll stop and take some questions a little bit later. But specifically, Ray, a couple of weeks ago, I stitched one of your videos, and my mindset, I think the problem with society is self-awareness. I think that there's a lack of self-awareness from a lot of people in this world, and they're not willing to accept that they are part of the problem in their own life, in their own story, and they're not willing to reframe that. That's something that I had to learn too. I used to be like that, and through years of therapy and really just becoming really in tune with myself, specifically when I stitched one of your videos and you kind of came back at me and kind of corrected me, and because I'm good with constructive criticism now, you really made me think, and it was the dynamic of vulnerability versus emotional intimacy or emotional availability or emotional maturity. Can you talk on the differences of vulnerability versus that?
Masculinity is, this is me, masculinity and femininity are perfect and whole the way they are. And this is part of the division thing we're talking about. If I say 100 years ago, men and women did this, this, and this, what a detractor would say is, well, we had certain problems then. Well, we have certain problems now too. How about that? Right? Which gets back to, it's not a male or female problem, it's a societal problem. Mm-hmm. So when masculinity, and by the way, I don't think people at our level, whether we're talking about vulnerability or me talking about more conventional masculinity, I don't think we're purposely, I don't think anybody at our level anyway is purposely putting out misinformation or anything like that. I think most people are just going along because this language has been changing for decades, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm pointing things more at the, what's that lady's name? Brene Brown and Lewis Howes. Yeah. They get on and they're basically saying, not basically, they are saying masculinity is not whole. It needs these other ingredients. Mm-hmm. And if we accept their definition of masculinity, they're right. But nobody of that stature anyways is coming along and saying femininity is not whole. Femininity itself is not good. Nobody's saying that. Now there's other messages that women are getting and whatever, but that gets to my larger point about vulnerability versus emotional intimacy. I refuse to accept the definition that me being emotionally open with my wife and my family is vulnerable. There's no weakness in that. And vulnerability, get into the definitions, whatever. Vulnerability is to put yourself in a point of weakness. I'm not going to accept the definition that me being emotionally intimate with a girlfriend, wife, or my family in general, that's not me being weak. And so the initial argument that will come back to me is they'll give an example of this man or that guy, or maybe somebody's personal story, and they say, well, I wasn't able to be emotionally intimate with my wife. Okay, that's not a masculine problem. That's a you problem.
Hmm.
And you dig a little deeper, and this is where we get into the academics, the mainstream, the Brene Browns and such. Excuse me. Um, they will take it deeper, and what it really comes down to, if you watch enough of it and you read enough of it, this is the feminine emotional response, and this is the masculine emotional response. They're different. And the message, at least in academia and the larger voices out there, they're basically saying the normal, healthy masculine emotional response is wrong. It needs to be more like a woman's. Now, I'm not saying you're saying that, and there's a lot of
Right.
guys on TikTok that are butting up against that message, I guess you'd say. But again, I think most people at our level, they're just rolling with the language because it's been changing. So I'm
Right.
kind of trying to poke back at some of the bigger voices going, you know what you're doing. When Brene Brown, Lewis Howes get on there and they say vulnerability is strength, no, no, it's not. If an army's on the field and their flanks wide open, they're not embracing that. They're going to fix it. And language
Right.
matters. And so if we as men approach ourselves and everything we do from a point of strength, so think of it as a little boy. I want to be tough, right? I want to
Yeah.
be the badass. I want to be whatever, right? I can make a lot of mistakes along the way, but if my mindset is to be tough, if my mindset is to be this virile man, I'm eventually going to get there if I don't screw myself up before I get there, right? But if my
Right.
mindset starting out is one of um, embracing vulnerability, and I've heard you use that phrase again, I'm not poking that at you. That's
No,
that's the
you're good.
lingo today. That's the kind of
Yeah.
thing I'm trying to go, hey, everybody look. And so I know what people mean when they say, I think when I hear guys at our level say embrace vulnerability, the sentiment that I get out of that is let's fix it, which is good. I'm with you. Let's
Yep.
fix it. But that's where I get back to correcting language, fixing language, because George Orwell and all the great dystopian novelists, they had a point, and you can look back at history, and when there's an agenda that has run aground, it's gone too far, propaganda and the manipulation of language is exactly how they do it. And I'm not talking about some conspiratorial sort of thing. I'm thinking more along the lines of like Camille Paglia, of all people. I
Yeah.
think she refers to herself as first wave feminist, but
Yeah.
even people of Camille Paglia's stature are out there going, "Hey, I'm still a feminist, but whatever's going on right now, it's gone too far." And she gets into a
Correct.
lot of what's happening on campuses, and that's kind of out
Correct.
of my wheelhouse. But
Yeah.
that's to me vulnerable to push the message of vulnerability and to push the message of a man a man needs to be more emotionally open, raises emotional IQ, all these things. I think that's starting from the wrong point. That's starting from a point of
Correct.
weakness, and that we're just going to embrace the weakness, as opposed
Correct.
to what when I used to preach a little bit. One of my favorite analogies was the breakwater. I've mentioned it once or twice. If you pull up a picture or a video on Google of a breakwater, you're going to see this spit of land and rough seas on one side and calm seas on the other. And to me, that's masculinity, right? I'm
Yep.
here to protect my family. I'm here to
Yep.
protect those that are close to me. And the
Yep.
rough seas coming against me, I have to be tough for that.
Yes.
It doesn't mean I don't have
Yes.
emotions. It doesn't mean I don't talk to my friends when I feel like I need to. But if I start embracing weakness, you're going to start to see that breakwater give way. And the roughness of the seas over here is going to get over here and affect my family.
Yes. And I
So,
think, and, and and that's a great analogy when it comes to deciphering that, because a true trait of a grounded masculine man is he's emotionally available. He's protective. He's a leader. He leads with integrity and love and respect. He's focused. He's self-reliant. Those are all healthy masculine traits. Um, but where I think the disconnect is, and where the vulnerable, where they take the word vulnerability and skew it, is with the men in today's world who were only taught protect and provide. That's it. That's all you have to do. That almost, I don't know. tentatively use the word toxic masculinity, because anybody and everybody can be toxic, but when you're not taught to be emotionally available or emotionally mature, and all you think is that I just need to provide and protect for my family and that's it, well, you know, femininity was absolutely needed to level the playing field. But what didn't happen is traditional men or older men who weren't emotionally available never evolved. They never taught their children to evolve to be emotionally available. They didn't even know how to do it. So now you have men in today's world, and this is just my perspective on it, who are scared and don't know how to be emotionally available, and they would rather just cower into themselves, and rather than go get help, rather than reach out for therapy or life coaching or mentorship or of any sort. And that's where I think they're playing on that they're playing that vulnerability card, is right there in that dynamic.
No, I would agree with that. And this is where it gets difficult. Yeah, it gets difficult to talk about because there's no one starting point. But in the mid to late '60s, a lot of things start to change.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm real careful in anything not to put all my chips on one color. It's not just one thing, but there's this confluence of things. To your point about these men aren't really taught what it means to be masculine, they're not taught what it means to have a normal masculine emotional response. A lot of that comes down to single parent homes.
Mm-hmm.
I was blessed. I grew up with just traditional mom and dad. They both worked. Mom's a nurse. Dad was a policeman. My dad, even though he's a policeman, he was not a tough guy. He didn't want to be a cop. He grew up so poor. He just wanted a civil service job. His
Right.
dream job was the post office, which he finally got after he retired, ironically. But what my dad was, however, he didn't like sports. When he retired, he got rid of his guns. If you met him, you thought he was an accountant. And because I have this kind of overt, whatever demeanor that I have, you might think I'm just like my dad. Nope. My dad thought I was crazy. I was going to the Marine Corps. He's like, that's hard. Go to the Air Force. I'm like, no, I'll be a Marine. All that to the point, though. My dad not being, my dad not being overtly masculine in that kind of tough guy sense. He was old school manners, man. He would not speak a negative word about somebody. So his neighbor was another police officer that I sort of knew, and I was an adult and had come home on vacation. I used to live out of state, and I said, "Oh, I didn't know so and so was your neighbor." And my dad just said, "Yeah," and that was it. And I thought, I'm an adult now. I know what that means. I go, "Oh, Dad doesn't like him," you know. And then you know what? I talked to some other people later about that neighbor. Nobody likes that guy. So I had a bunch of other people telling me that why that guy was so unlikable. But my dad, not a word, man. And that's old school masculinity, right?
Right.
Zip it.
Yeah.
At least on things like that. And that's not even a masculinity thing, really. That's old school manners. You don't gossip. You don't tell the
Yes.
people's business. And my
Right.
dad was like, nope, we're not doing that.
Well,
And so I
and if
had a good example in a lot of things like that. And go ahead.
No, I think, and you're totally
Go
right.
ahead.
If you're talking about the masculine feminine, there's grounded versions and there's wounded versions. And in a wounded version of a feminine, it's about gossip. It's about codependency. It's about, insecurities. I mean, so if you're a man and you're gossiping and you're insecure and you're talking crap about your fellow man, you're actually acting out in a wounded feminine energy. You're not in your grounded masculine energy.
Yep.
So it's a great point.
Yeah. And I used to tell people all the time, um, more in my church days, I said, there's a certain energy to this. And I could probably think of some scripture if I wasn't trying to think of other things. But basically, it's not even just Christianity. There's a lot of different philosophies and religions that say this. What you put out there is coming back at you.
Yep.
And that whole idea of gossip and telling other people's business, that absolutely 100%, regardless of what your spiritual beliefs are, that comes back at you. That's in the long run. In the short term, it comes back at you because there's always one guy in the office that talks so much crap about everybody. And well, if you talk crap about everybody else, what are you saying when I'm not here? Right? So you get a reputation. So even
Exactly.
in the short run. But anyway, that's kind of a digression. But I learned these things from my parents. There was a church we went to for a short time when I was a kid. And I don't remember all the details, but we left because some kind of scandal. And the pastor 15, 20 years later dies. And my family, I was in the Marines at the time, but my parents and my sister went to it, the funeral for this guy that had all the scandal. And my sister came back later and told me, she said, Dad would not let anything be said about him. You know,
Wow.
he held a position, leave it alone, scandal or not. And my sister had said something about, well, what, when they're walking on the funeral, what about, I wish I remember the details. I don't remember the details. Well, what about the thing that happened? And my dad said, just said, stop. Not even harshly. He just said, nope, nope, we're not doing that. And my
Yeah.
sister said, gotcha. Good. You know, all that back to the point though, if you grow up in a grounded tradition, at least somewhat traditional home, you pick up on this stuff. And so I read something the other day, I think I posted on it, from 1968 on, we've doubled, more than doubled the number of single parent homes.
Yeah.
And at least in the 100 something countries studied, we now lead the world in single parent homes, you
Yeah.
know. And so young men are growing up, what's masculinity? It's gangster rap, it's Hollywood, it's Leonardo DiCaprio disposing 24-year-old girlfriends like he's changing socks, you know.
Yeah.
It's up your body count, guys, but don't marry a girl with a body count. You know, it's all this stuff. That's masculinity now.
Yeah.
And guys
It's
don't know what to
aggression.
think.
Yeah.
And there
It's
is a
aggression.
true element, yeah, there's a true element to, there is a part of men, suck it up. Don't complain, suck it up.
Hmm.
But if that's not measured with emotional maturity that hopefully somebody would pick up from their dad, that just turns into anything you would say being used against you,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
And so we've kind of gone astray a little bit, but back to what you originally said, or at least my answer was, I think this goes back to single parent homes more than anything, although maybe not exclusively, but I think that's probably the biggest factor.
Yeah. And for me, and that's a great catalyst to for me to tell you about my story was I was brought up in the 80s and 90s, and I was taught to not be a wimp, to not talk about your emotions, to not, I didn't have that outlet that you just spoke of somewhere I could go to or someone I could go to talk about the things that were happening. So when my parents got divorced at age 15, I just kind of had no one to talk to. So when my parents got divorced, my grandparents died, ex-girlfriends in high school, my best friend died, like all of these things were happening to me, and I had no outlet, nowhere to go. My dad was never around when I was a kid. He was either working or drinking. That was his life. And so as I grew older, I grew very codependent and had a ton of attachment issues and a ton of, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Uh, Abandonments from my father when I was a child. And I never, throughout my 20s and 30s, I never really, I just suppressed all of it. And for me, it was alcohol. I used alcohol to suppress it and not feel it and just kind of make my way through life with all of these feelings that I didn't understand and all these, emotions that I couldn't convey because I couldn't be I needed to be this masculine man or whatever I thought a masculine man was at that point in time in my life. I needed to portray that protective and providing atmosphere, but I was not emotionally available at all. And that was the demise of my relationship with my ex-wife, was my emotional immaturity and emotional unavailability and my unwillingness to go get help, because the narrative was you didn't get help, or else you would be subjected to ridicule or shame or guilt or be called names. So it wasn't until that my marriage had fell apart and I realized that I had two daughters that I now needed to figure out how to show up for, did I say, okay, I'm going to go to therapy, I'm going to go get help, I'm going to get sober, I'm going to do all the things that I need to do to set the bar for my daughters to be what a real man is supposed to be. And that's how I ended up here on TikTok telling my story. So I have a couple of
I
questions.
probably went, I used,
Oh, go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I just gonna say I probably went 20 years without drinking, and then right around the time the marriage was really coming apart, I probably drank, not never to a real problem level, but I probably drank till it was a couple of years, I guess. And I've always been a health nut, gym rat, all that. And I was still going to the gym and eating right, so it kind of masked the issues a little bit. But I
Yeah.
remember being at the gym one day and just feeling polluted, just like, oh, this is not good. But
Yeah.
There's more to that, but we can get into that later. But there's that two year period you're really wrestling with some stuff. Go ahead with some questions.
Yeah. So one question is part of the problem that society deems men who are tough as having toxic masculinity, meaning if the energy that a healthy masculine man, or we could even get into the alpha male and female at this point, um, is that toxic masculinity is what the question is, or how do you differentiate toxic masculinity from healthy masculinity?
Is um I I'm prone to getting into semantics, and I don't want to do that because that's a quick way to lose people's interest. Um, I don't use the phrase toxic masculinity, and the only time I've ever used the terms alpha on my post was indirectly talking about something else. Not because those things aren't real, that there's not something to it. Certain words get so freighted down with multiple meanings, it almost just muddies the water. So typically, I will use a term either traditional masculinity, or I even prefer conventional masculinity. Traditional seems to convey a sense that it's in the past and not coming back.
Right.
Conventional is just this is what it is. So toxic masculinity, as it's understood, um, I think as close as a legitimate definition of toxic masculinity would just be what we just talked about, is this warped sense of what masculinity has sort of come to mean in a lot of people's mind. So again, if it's the guy out just banging girls and kids with different girls and not ever taking care of them, the idea that I'm going to chase money to the extent that nothing else matters. There's all these kind of,
Yep.
trying to be careful here. There's all these different ideas of being some kind of a stud without any sort of responsibility. And I
Yep.
understand that there's a lot of good arguments about how marriage has become wrecked by the state, and it's too much to get into. But at the end of the day, I think what is considered toxic masculinity is not masculinity at all. I think if we're going to call anything toxic masculinity, it's what you and I already covered, which is what I just said, is that
Yep.
it's this warped, manipulated version of a knuckle dragging, baby making, no responsibility, no ethics. That's the modern version of masculinity, is this caveman who can't keep his pants zipped up and never takes responsibility for his actions.
Yeah.
That's what toxic masculinity is, but that's not masculinity.
Right.
That's a manipulated, warped version that stems out of all this other stuff we've talked about
Yep.
for the last 60 years.
Yep. Absolutely. It's
So I don't
it's
know if that answers your
aggressive. It's
question. I kind of got a little astray
controlling.
there.
It's it's yeah. It's immature. It's numb, emotionally numb.
Well, you know what it is? Yeah, yeah. You just said it. It's immature. So I went through a certain state. Okay, I'll tell on myself a little bit. I mentioned I did pretty well with girls early on when I didn't know what I was doing. And I had no idea. I thought girls, if I want this, then girls want this. And we were young. I mean, high school, but man, we were young. And I was making out with this girl. Don't worry, I'll keep it rated G. But making out with this girl, and I was really like, hey, hey, hey. And she was kind of, well, maybe. And she sort of gave up. Like, all right, go ahead. And just kind of like, go ahead. And I suddenly felt like such a dirtbag. And I
Yeah.
realized I'm manipulating, I'm coercing. I'm
Yeah.
14, and I'm just like, woo, a girl. And when she's just kind of like let her guard down, I said, fine, go ahead. And nothing. I had 2 buttons on her shirt down, and I literally did her buttons back up. And we went and sat on the couch and watched TV. I just felt like such a dirtbag. So the toxic masculinity, as much as I'll use that word, that's the immature 14-year-old boy that just wants sex,
Yep.
or whatever. You add some maturity to that, and so maybe it's because I was raised in a good home with good parents, going to church. I wasn't really into church at that time, but I was raised around it. And so when that girl did that, and I had that guilt, that shame come on me, like, dude, you're a dirtbag. Look at you. She doesn't
Yeah.
want this. What are you doing to her?
Yep.
And again, I remember 2 buttons. Did her buttons up. We watched, I don't know, I think Seinfeld or something. I don't know. But that's the difference between an immature masculinity. Can we even call that masculinity? That's just dumb
No,
shit that guys do when they
no,
don't know what they're
no.
doing. And they grow up
Yeah,
without dads and all this other broken stuff. And that they mess up and now we're going to call that masculinity.
yeah. I don't use the word toxic either. I use the word wounded or grounded when it comes to masculine and feminine. You know, people that, like I said, the wounded masculine is going to be overly aggressive, overly controlling, immature, manipulative. Like he's very selfish. He's self-centered. He's not going to be a leader. It's going to be all about him. That's a wounded man. Or even women can find themselves in that energy too, especially with the single moms who are dealing with a shitty baby daddy, or who's not even existent, and she's having to do everything for herself. She can find herself wrapped up into that masculine energy, that wounded energy, where she's just fed up and controlled and aggressive and angry, and maybe she's immature too at that point in her life. But it kind of flows back and forth. But so yeah, that's a great answer to that question. I have one more question, and then we'll get back to one. This will be a great catalyst to the next question I have for you. um, do you think, since you are from a spiritual background, do you think that it's also the devil attacking men because they are the lead? They're supposed to be the leaders of their family. Is it spiritual warfare that's attacking men nowadays?
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't get real I actually will be more so because I'm already leaning that way. I don't get super into religion and spirituality. I've touched on it. I like how Jordan Peterson delivers his message. He talks about the spiritual without being over religious, if that makes sense. And if
Yep.
you go too far one direction, you lose half your audience. And we're not talking about keeping an audience. If you have something that needs to be heard, that lets as many people hear it as possible, right?
Yep.
So on that note, um, I hadn't talked about this, but it is absolutely spiritual warfare. It is absolutely, if you're in, this will cross some swords with the non-religious, non-spiritual, but if you're going to look at the Bible, the man is the head. It's Christ, man, wife. Now the man will sacrifice for that woman, and the woman will give to that man. And 1 Corinthians 11, there's other verses. Um, but the point is that is a biblical description of a complementary relationship, yin and yang, however you want to think of it, right? And
Yep.
so,
Equally yoked.
getting back to what I said about society as a whole being split down the middle on so many things, what if you're the devil? Now we're talking spirituality. If you're the devil and you want to destroy everything, what's the most what's the most fundamental thing you can do to tear society apart? You go right into the family and you
Yep.
start ripping men and women apart, and they're both to blame, and they're both trash now, and both have versions of immature both have versions of immaturity on both on the feminine and the masculine, and now we're going to call those things femininity and masculinity, but they're not. They're corrupted versions of it, right?
Yep.
And that's what hell does. So he attacks the man first, and they're attacking women as well. But you attack you. What are you going to do if there was? Let's go back to tribal times, and the neighboring tribe over here. You want to take them out. If you could go get the 10 strongest men out of a 200 person tribe, they're weak. They're nothing. Those are the leaders.
Yep.
And I'm talking in primitive times when we didn't have cell phones and 911 we could call, right? So we kind of go back
Yep.
to who's the strongest, who's the most able. You need some men, and not just physically strong men, some mentally strong men. So if we can take out the top 10% or so of the strong men in the neighboring tribe, they're done. We're wiping them out. And that's what
Yep.
hell's doing to the world today.
Yep. I 100% agree. The devil and his minions do coerce this land and try to get into our minds in any way, shape, or form, change our perspectives, change our mindset, change our society. It's absolutely, I 100% believe in spiritual warfare as well. But so leading into the question that I really know is going to resonate with a lot of people, especially with the single women that are in this live now and the ones that will see this moving forward. Um, if a single mom doesn't have a positive masculine role model in her life, whether it be the father of her children or just in general, what can she do to raise healthy masculine men?
Probably the first thing that pops into mind, and this is just because a female follower, a friend of mine here, she had actually told me a story, something along those lines. The first thing would be to recognize a woman cannot step into her masculine energy and do the job of a dad or a man. She can do a lot. She can be tough when she needs to be tough. She can do just about everything physically, to run the home and to be the disciplinarian. But there's a certain leadership that only the masculine brings, a man. And so this friend of mine here, she couldn't make it tonight. She actually let me know she wouldn't be able to make it tonight. She talked about when her now adult son was little, and she had just gotten divorced, and he was like 7 or 8 or something like that. And she was playing catch with baseball. She was playing catch with him, and his coach came to her and said, "Please quit playing catch with your son. He's throwing like you."
Oh,
you know
Jesus.
and I think a lot of women out there, fair enough, if they haven't been told any different, a lot of women out there, if that male coach came and said, "Don't play catch with your son, he's throwing like you," she'd be offended,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I wouldn't always even blame her, depending on her age and what her background is. But like the friend I'm talking about, from here, she said, she went, "Whoa, I get it, I throw like a girl, my son's throwing like a girl." And she got her dad involved, she got her brother involved. She didn't tell me who, the couple other men that she knew. And so she was actively recruiting decent men where she could find them and said, "Go play catch with my son, go do this, go do that." um, so, and then I don't want to just say everybody go to church, because I'm going to say that and you're going to go to the wrong church, whatever. um, when I was heavy into church, when I was kind of young minister type, um, all the younger ministers had been raised in church, and they didn't have much of a background in the real world. And so I was in the Marine Corps, grew up playing sports and blah blah blah, all this stuff. And those young men loved it, man. I taught 2 years at a private Christian school, and I taught math and science, but then I was the only fit guy there, so they had me teaching gym class. And I went out and got all. I used to box a little bit. I went and got some portable. You've seen these stands where you put the heavy bag on one side and speed bag on the other. And I had all this stuff set up, and I said, "You guys don't have to go out and fight." I said, "But if you know how to throw a punch," and I got him working the speed bag and working all this stuff, got him on the heavy bag, just knowing how to throw a punch.
Yeah.
And to the point, some of these guys didn't have dads, and these guys are all in their early 30s now. And every one of those guys I'm still friends with online. We've all moved different places, but they still reach out to me. They didn't have dads, like I said, and they still remember Brother Gardner taking them off and teach them how to throw a left hook. And they remember me telling them in class, if they didn't bring their book to class, you got a zero for the day. Because they used to forget their books, so they go walk around the halls. Like, nope, zero. And I was the only teacher that did that. Well, guess what? Nobody ever forgot their book in my class again, right?
Right.
And they
Right.
all still remember that to this day. So for the answer to a single mom, there's not one single answer, but find some good men. Don't
Yep.
go marry a dude just to marry him either.
No.
You'll wind up in a mess. But whether it's church or family, neighbors, you can find some decent men that will spend time with you, especially if you have boys that need that masculine influence. But look around. There's some decent people. If there's no decent people in your social circle, you need a new social circle. That's what I would say.
Yes. Yes. 100%. I love that. I love that answer. And I absolutely, especially that you threw that in at the end. Do not rush into a relationship just because you think your child needs a man in his life. You will regret that decision more more than you know. Um, yeah. Did we have any
Yeah.
more? So I don't really have any more questions. Do you have any questions? Do you have any comments that you want to talk about? Anything specific that you want to talk about?
No, I think you covered everything that was on my mind. I was driving back from dinner, had to do that little family thing like I was talking about. And the thing that kept running through my mind was along the topics of, what we've been talking about is what's a masculine response or emotional response or whatever to stress, to intimacy, all this. Um, Nobody on either side ever gives you a good example because it's so hard to quantify, right? There's millions of different possibilities. Well, Brian, how are you going to react to this little thing?
Right.
Man, it depends on you can't really say, right?
Right.
So I keep coming back in my mind to what I said earlier. Here's the female, and I don't even mean good or bad or more. The female response, emotional response, is not the male emotional response. That's why we're complementary, right? That's the yin and the yang.
Yep.
If we blur that until they're the same, it messes everything up. And so what I was thinking about driving home a while ago was, and this is one of these manly rules. I don't come home and complain about my day. I would tell any man, do not come home and complain about your day. You can talk about it a little bit, but you will absolutely weaken yourself in the eyes of your wife, girlfriend, kids, whatever. Don't come in and spill all your problems. If you want to talk about it with your wife and say, hey, the work, I think I'm gonna put some resumes out. This isn't going well. Fine. I'm not saying don't say anything. But my thing is don't just spill it all out. And then I thought I should talk about my day, regardless of all that, because my day was hectic. I'm not getting into details, but I'm thinking about doing this. I want to be sharp and able to speak coherently. I have a very, very fast paced job. It's high. I like it, but it's high stress, man. A lot of deadlines. I'm a production planner, and basically I solve everybody else's problem. And my desk is covered with paper. I've got 100 emails, that. Um, and then this family thing comes up, and I've got one lunatic person in the family, and they're not going to be there. I didn't know that though. So I spent 2 hours of my day worrying that person's going to be there. And then I've been divorced for 2 years, right? I still have kids I'm trying to maintain a relationship with, right? And my teenage daughter's mad at me for no good reason because she's 16 and that's where she's at,
Yep.
And so I've got all these things, and when I'm sitting here looking at some of these emails, people asking dumb questions, and I just kind of like, man, this is the kind of thing we talk about, you and I. It's like, how are you going to respond to that? Are you going to get angry? Are you going to take it out on
Yep.
somebody? Are you going to bottle it up so much? And I thought, I I have my spiritual background. I have my parents, my family background, and I really do suck it up. And sometimes I'm going to have to talk about it. But for the
Yep.
most part, I know it sounds old fashioned or something, but you suck it up because you've been here before and it's going to pass. And this job doesn't mean anything at the end of the day. I do my hard work. If they don't appreciate it, good. I'll go find another job. My teenage daughter, she's a good girl. She's going to grow out of this. If the crazy family member is there at dinner tonight, whatever, ignore that. So on and so on. And it's really practice. It's boot camp, right? So
Yeah.
18-year-old Ray, September 12th, 1988, was a boy. And so 34 years ago this week, I was in my first week of boot camp,
Oh
right?
wow.
So I was a boy. This time 34 years ago, I was a boy, right?
Yeah.
3 months later, totally different person. Totally different person. That's the pressure, extreme example, but that's the pressures. And when we have a little bit of maturity to start with, we have a little bit of good example. And honestly, people, not just you and I, but if enough people are out there, whether it's on a platform or your neighbor, enough people are out there holding one another accountable and saying, whoop, hold up, buddy. Do you really want to get a
Yep.
divorce now? You're going to go
Yep.
drinking again? All these little things. And so you start off with enough of something. My story, like I said, the church background, the parents, you start off with enough of something, and it's like the boot camp. It's the training. It's the I've been here before. Paris Island really was hazing. Go watch Full Metal Jacket. Wasn't exactly like that, but pretty damn close, man. Why do they do that? Right? So when you're in a real battle, you've already been screwed with enough. You've already been messed with enough that you're like, whatever, you can't hurt my feelings.
Yep.
If the VP above me at corporate accuses me of doing something silly again that had nothing to do with me, I'm not worried about that. I've been through way worse than this, brother.
Yep.
And so that's my day. That's what I was saying about driving.
Mental.
That's my day. What do
Yep.
men do? We mostly suck it up. If you have something to fall back on and say, hey, I've been through worse, you
Sure.
know, and even think of yourself, I'm the breakwater. I'm a tough man. I need to be hard so others around me can be soft,
So, do you
or
have
at
an
least not
outlet
as hard.
though? Do you have an outlet, or do you believe in therapy? Do you believe in life coaching? Do you believe that men should have an outlet for someone, or just a friend or someone they can go to say, "Hey, this is what I'm dealing with." That they can open up emotionally to and not feel, like that one person they can go to.
I have close friends. So I have two friends that go back to high school. Um, One's another Marine, of course. So, we have a lot to relate to. Um, I have my church. I have my pastor. I have my spiritual. Now, here's the thing: not everybody has that. So I understand that when I say, "Oh, I have my," for 20 years I read the Bible at least an hour a day. So I that's a lot to be able to fall back on. Well, what if I'm talking to somebody my age that doesn't have that? They don't have a good friend. I don't always have the perfect answer. So yes, there's somebody to talk to. It's kind of like the single mom question. If you don't have somebody to talk to, you fix your social circle, man.
Yep.
There's somewhere along the line you got to step up, and this is kind of the step up, man up kind of thing. Not man up in the sense of don't say anything. You need to find yourself a group of friends. You know what? Box, do jujitsu, go to church. You can find good dudes out there, right? And I did jujitsu. I'm some of the best guys in the world you meet in a boxing gym. Um, there, in my experience, there's a bunch of kids in there just trying to get off the streets, or they're a bunch of older guys trying to get those kids off the streets, right? And I've never been to a boxing gym that didn't have a lot of good old salts. Some salty old guy that can give you the wisdom of the world. But
Yep.
something can be done. What I do, I have two really close friends. I have my spiritual grounding that's internal, but it's that what I can fall back on, and all of that corresponds, or at least fits with, that I do see myself as a breakwater, and I will. And I know a lot of people aren't going to understand this. I have the conversation in my mind. I'm tough, and if you don't pull through this and you don't do the right thing and you don't get this shit done, you're a weak man. I can't live with that, right? I know that sounds kind of blustery, right? But if we have internal conversations where we're holding ourselves accountable, even little things like getting up for the gym in the morning. I get up at 3:30. I'm a morning person, but that's extreme. And I'm not patting myself in the back. That's the only way I'm going to get to the gym every day is if I go that early. Plus, it's empty when I get there, right?
Yep.
But man, I don't feel like getting out of bed at 3:30 in the morning. But I'll call myself all sorts of unmentionable names. I will, man. That internal conversation, I'm poking myself in the chest. I'm saying, get up, dude. Be the man you want to be. Hey, here's the thing. I had this thought in high school, and somebody else had the thought, and I thought it was so original. And then 10 years later, now I see it's common. We've all done this. Whether you see your life as a movie or a book, a lot of people have done this, right? If your life was a movie or a book you were reading, would you want to be the character that you are? Does that make sense?
Yep.
I'm the protagonist of my book. If I sleep in for 6 months, keep saying I'm going to get to the gym, do I want to be the protagonist of that book? Right? Do you like
Yep.
yourself as the main character? Is that somebody you want to be? Those are internal conversations. Women can have them too. I'm speaking from the male perspective. This is all I got. The male perspective is hold yourself accountable, poke yourself in the chest, call yourself bad names, right?
Yeah,
And
for
get
sure.
after it, man. I know that there's so much motivational stuff out there that sounds like a cliche, but really you have to have an internal voice that's going to hold you accountable. Get out of bed, put the bottle down, and you
Yep.
really have to think of yourself. I'm going to be this bad name that I'm not going to use because I'm trying to keep this PG-13, or I'm going to be the tough man, breakwater, John Wayne Rambo. Pick your figure, right? But I'm going to
Yep.
be that, and that's the conversation I have at 3:30 in the morning when I want to roll over and go back to sleep.
Yes, me too. So here's the $1,000,000 question. Why are you saying that men shouldn't open up to their women, their spouses, their girlfriends? They shouldn't be emotionally open with them about their feelings, or should they be?
In an emotionally mature man will open up to his girlfriend or wife. I always have, but it's not going to look like what her response would be. I used the example in the post of the day. I don't cry at the end of movies. I'm not resisting to cry, and I'm not saying I never would cry, right? But you take 100 men, 100 women, and have them watch, I don't know, 10 movies that are guaranteed tear jerkers. There's going to be a big difference in how many women cry versus how many men cry. And the men that cry, more power to you. In the post that I made, Good Will Hunting is one of my favorite movies ever. Love that. I probably watch that once a year. Love that movie. And if you know the movie, Matt Damon and Robin Williams are hugging it out at the end. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. And I've
Yep.
never cried, but even talking about it, I got goosebumps, right? And
Yep.
I'll just sit there and go, wow. But I don't cry. I would, right? So the point is the difference in emotional response. I get goosebumps. I feel good about it. But the difference I have versus my girlfriend, wife, whatever, they're just two differences. Do I open up? Sure I do. Sure I do. And if a guy can't do that, then something's wrong with him. And if he does do it and he feels vulnerable, if he feels weak, then that means he feels threatened by her. So again, we're
Yep.
back to a problem, right? Why would I
Yep.
feel threatened by my wife? That doesn't make any sense. The only valid reason I can think for that would be if let's say they get married really young and he's 20 or 20 and he just doesn't have emotional maturity yet. And he just, like I said, don't come home and unload all your problems from work onto your family. It weakens you. They need to see you as that breakwater. You can talk some, just don't go blah, right?
Right.
So maybe in a married couple's young and he doesn't know any better, and he remembers, hey, the first 2 or 3 years we were married, I would come home and vomit every problem all over the house, and he remembers that didn't get a good response. So now he buttons up and maybe
Yep.
does therapy, right? And they say open up. He's like, nope, not doing that again, man. So now he feels threatened. That's the only valid reason I can think of why a guy would feel threatened or
Yeah.
vulnerable, or, able to be hurt by being open with his spouse. But other than that, yeah, open up. It's just not going to look the same. Like the crying at the movie, it's just not going to look the same.
Right. And I did a video, and it's kind of the narrative that I talk about a lot, that men don't. I teach men and everybody alike, men and women, don't open up to anybody you don't feel comfortable opening up to. If you're in a fearful, scared place, you should not be opening up about stuff that you don't want to talk about with people you don't know how they're going to react to it. They could possibly use it against you. They could, it could possibly devalue you in their eyes. What my concession is, go get help. Go get help with whatever you're dealing with from your past, or your past relationships, or your mom or your dad or your uncle or whatever happened to you. Go get help with that. As a man, as a woman, whatever, whoever, go get help, heal it, and then come back to your partner from a happy, healed place, so you can open up emotionally about it and not be scared that it's going to be used against you, or not be scared. Like, you can lead that conversation as a man with your significant other. Hey babe, this is what happened to me. This is how I went and healed it. This is everything that I'm opening up to. You can lead that conversation, which will inherently make her feel safer with you opening up emotionally, versus you opening up from a scared, fearful place where she feels like you're weak. Because that's very probable that a woman would think that you're weak if you're, all this stuff happened to me, I don't know what I'm going to do. This very weak energy. Go get help, whether it be a mentor, whether it be another man who's been through, whether it be a best friend, whether it be a therapist, a counselor, a shaman, a priest, whatever it is. But go talk to someone and get yourself healed.
Yeah, exactly. I think probably the most common answer that I give, just shorthand answers, to people reaching out on my account, is men at a basic level, male therapy involves activity. So gym, jujitsu, boxing, something that's going to make a person compete, even if you're just training. And even to the, I talk about testosterone levels and all that a lot on my account too. Competing ups your testosterone,
Mhm.
right? So, more of an example with the gym, I guess. When my life is going as it should, I'm at the gym every day that I'm supposed to be at the gym. I'm there. I never miss a day. Um, I cut my hair, trim my beard twice a week. Um, my truck's always clean. I could go down the list. All these things. When life is going as it should, all these other little activities are in line. If I'm getting a little sloppy, I had a hand injury, so I missed a couple weeks in the gym. Yeah. If I keep doing that, the truck's not going to get washed quite as bit. Maybe I'm not cutting my hair and trimming my beard twice a week. Now I'm doing it once a week, right? So you start to look at things like a gym, jujitsu, boxing, whatever. These Jordan Peterson talks a lot about clean your room. He's kind of famous. Clean your room, clean your room.
Yep.
It's a it's not just a metaphor, it's literal, right? If I have this in order, then I'm going to get the next thing in order, right? So for a kind of low key, practical everyday therapy is go to the gym, wash your car, sleep very regularly, have a very regular schedule, have a routine, make breakfast. And Peterson talks about this as well. If people will have their sleep hours, they're as regulated, as routine as possible, make breakfast, go to the gym, have as much. It won't be a tyranny upon yourself to do it. But if you, as much as you have a routine, and then you introduce something that will challenge you, something physical for men, at least, challenge yourself physically. Women too. I'm speaking about men. Challenge yourself. If you're in the boxing gym, especially in jujitsu, because you can't train without rolling with somebody, right?
Yep.
And that's just it. It ups your testosterone. It makes you get in shape. It's part of this routine. Just like going to the gym or cleaning my truck, it makes me do things. It makes me follow things. I don't have time to be depressed. I don't have time to go sit and drink. I'm busy doing things, you know.
Yep.
So
Yep.
even if you don't get a therapist, even if you don't go to church, get yourself a routine, challenge yourself physically, get busy, be active. Don't allow yourself time to sit on the couch. My God, I've not watched a TV show, network, sitcom. I've not watched TV. I promise you, in 20 since about 1994, 1995. I have a
Holy
TV because
cow.
you got to watch hockey, but I don't. I don't remember where I was at. We were somebody. We were watching hockey. We were watching hockey playoffs, and some advertisements came on. Why was that? Oh, because the playoffs were on the big. I don't remember what NBC, maybe whatever it was.
Yeah.
I'm not used to seeing those regular commercials, and all these commercials are coming on for the regular sitcom type of TV shows, and I never even heard of these things. I don't just stop. Watch your sports, watch one or two shows. But if you've got enough time to sit around and binge watch shit, just you're doing something wrong. But that goes all back to therapy. I hate the term self care. It sounds goofy, but take care of yourself. Force yourself, accountability. Get to the gym, be active. Go somewhere where you can get
Discipline.
punched. Boxing gym.
Yep.
Push yourself, drive yourself, right?
Yeah, and there's just some things like I'll circle back to the whole, men opening up to their women. There's just some things, some really traumatic events that some men go through early on in life, or even in their early 20s, or whatever the situation or circumstance may be, that you just are not capable as a woman or as a partner to, from a psychology standpoint, you're not capable of helping them through that. There's no reason for you to know any of that that's going on. I mean, he can generally tell you what he's dealing with, but you can't help him. You're not his therapist. You know, the really dark traumas, the really deep
Yeah.
things, those are for professionals. He needs to get the help he needs, and in that essence, you need to provide him that safe place to go do it. You can't shame him, you can't guilt him, you can't try and coax him or coerce him into telling you what's going on just because you're controlling or you're manipulative. Like, that's not going to help anything. He's just going to shut down more and not want to tell you anything. Just create that safe place for him, appreciate him. I mean, men love appreciation. That's the number one thing for us. I mean, create that
Mm-hmm.
safe place for him to go get help. Know that it's not going to devalue him in your eyes. reassure him, and hopefully he'll come around. 9 times out of 10, men will come around if they feel safe and they can trust you, as your partner.
Yep, totally agree.
So, all right,
I
sir. Well,
agree.
I appreciate you 100%. If you guys have more questions, ask. Respect and appreciation. Yes, respect and appreciation goes a long way with men. Um, but
Hey, Travis.
yeah, so I just wanted to say I really appreciate you and your content. You are absolutely putting out what needs to be heard, whether it's agreed with or not. For me, it's bridging the gap between men and women and trying to bring them back together for you. I don't know. I mean, it's more of building the masculine man, but I mean, I wholeheartedly believe that femininity went way too far, and we, as men, or masculinity in today's society, it's been so devalued that we just. Oh, I know what I wanted to ask you real quick before we go. Can you differentiate the two? I have my own definitions, but differentiate the two between the nice guy and the good man, the good grounded masculine man and a nice guy. What does that look like, and what is the difference there? So women can kind of differentiate what a nice guy is and what a good, solid, masculine gentleman is.
I read an article maybe a year ago, Psychology Today, and I don't remember their exact third term, but it's a middle ground. So the nice guy is a pushover, right? He's too agreeable, whether it's purposeful, a really super nice guy, or as is often as the, it's more often the case that a super nice guy, his motives aren't any better than anybody else, right? So that super nice guy, he's not going to stand up for you're on a date and somebody cuts in front of you in line, right? Simple little things. A woman wants the guy to go, hey, don't, we're getting taken advantage of here. Don't get right. That's a nice guy. The middle ground. I wish I could remember. I'll look up that article later. But basically, they described he has a lot of quote unquote bad boy tendencies. And in the article, the example they used was the bad boy and this middle ground guy. Both of them might borrow your car, but the bad boy is going to bring it back on empty and needing washed. And he was being funny, obviously. He goes, the good guy's going to bring it back full of gas, And I forget all things, but there is a middle ground that he's a good, solid dude, and he may make some mistakes, and he may have done his body count thing back in his younger years or whatever, right? He's not a pushover. And here's what a lot of women get wrong. I know this from my own experience. He's a nice guy. He's going to be polite. If he didn't sleep with you on the first date or even try, it's because he didn't want to, because he's done with that. And
Yeah.
I've been single for 2 years. I've dated women. I didn't try to sleep with them the first night, and I could tell it confused them. They didn't know what to think of me. I have this tough guy persona or whatever that they see, and then I'm not trying to bed them down the first night. They're what? And they would treat me like a nice guy.
Yeah.
We didn't date very long. Their whole persona changed, right? So women get mixed up. Maybe it's not their fault. They don't know what to think of that. But women get mixed up sometimes too when an otherwise masculine dude actually is polite. He actually texts back the next day.
Yeah.
And one woman I talked to a while back last year, I said, you don't even know what a good guy looks like because you've been treated badly for so long.
Yeah.
And she agreed with me. She's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I guess. I said, so I text back the next day and you didn't know what to do with it. And now all of a sudden I'm a nice guy. She didn't say that, but that was kind of the
Yeah.
implication of the whole thing. So
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered that quite directly. Nice guys are nice guys. They won't stand up for themselves. They won't stand up for themselves. They're not going to stand up for their woman. Bad boy, out, super alpha, dickhead, whatever. He is what he is. The guy in the middle, he's a good dude. He's not perfect. He's going to stand up for you. He's going to stand up for himself, and he'll probably text you back tomorrow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
ladies, don't confuse that with being,
Yeah.
if a guy
That's
calls you back when he says he's going to call you back, and the last three guys you fell for, go ahead.
no. Yeah,
Right?
you're right,
They
and I kind
they
of
get
break it
so
up into.
accustomed to the hot bad boy guys.
Yeah. Yeah, and I break it up into four different categories. You have the fuck boy, you have the simp, or the overt, the overtly nice guy that'll just do anything and everything. It was the pushover who puts you on a pedestal. Then you have the nice guy, and then you have the gentleman slash good man. And then where women go wrong, not where they go wrong, but where they get duped is in this nice guy persona, who's kind of, he knows the right things to say, but he doesn't respect boundaries. He's kind of passive aggressive in his comments. He's a little bit controlling. He's just kind of not really respectful, but he is. He brushes up, like. And I always tell women when I'm talking to them, or in these comments, or in these lives in the comments, like, number one, if you want to get rid of the fuck boys, keep your pants on first and foremost. They'll see their way out, because they'll see that they can't get in your pants immediately.
They'll go away.
And with the nice guy, like you said, I mean, with the good man, he's going to respect boundaries. If you tell him, like, hey, I don't want to sleep, I have a boundary of a month or 2 or 3 before I sleep with anyone. The good man's going to respect that, because he's not out for, he's past that stage in his life where it's all about sex, or it's all about intimacy, or it's all about body count. He's going to respect wherever you're at in your life, and he's going to be looking for other cues to tell him that you're a good woman, that you're marriage material, that you're life partner material, that you're kind, compassionate, loving, open, all of those things. He's going to be looking for that above and beyond. Not that he doesn't like intimacy, or not that he doesn't like the physical connection, but he's going to respect your boundaries. He's not going to push them. But the nice guy is. The nice guy, if you tell him, I'm going to wait 2 months or 3 months, he's going to be constantly pushing up against that boundary and trying to control you. And then, the passive aggressiveness, when you tell him no, can you tell a man no and let, him not lose his shit over it, like a little child? It's, those are the things that you really need to look out for. And that's where women, you find themselves 6, 7, 8 months, a year into a relationship, and the mask falls off, and now you have this unhealed nice guy who has no respect for you or himself, and now he exposes himself, and you're kind of stuck. So
I agree.
So yeah, but all right, sir, it's getting late. I gotta get up early in the morning. But I really appreciate your time and effort and all your knowledge. I knew that this live was going to be very informative, and I hope everybody who's in here enjoyed it. I hope you guys got a lot of value out of it. Go follow Ray. He has amazing content when it comes to the masculine feminine dynamic, and especially men. So I appreciate you, sir. Have a great night.
Cool, man. Appreciate you having me on.
Yep, this will be uploaded to my YouTube page tomorrow if anybody wants to see it or rewatch it, or send it to someone else. So thank you, sir. Have a great night.
Cool. Good night, bro.
Night. And everybody else, I appreciate you. I'll talk to you guys on Sunday. I'll be live with Melissa, Virtuous Overcomer. We'll be talking more about faith-based stuff and testimonies in our walk with God, and how we got to where we are in life. And she'll be sharing her stories on her walk as a single mom and trying to be a virtuous woman in today's society. So I look forward to that. I'll schedule that here in a little bit, and you guys can register for it, or just show up at 3 o'clock Central Time on Sunday, and we'll talk for a little bit about that. So thank you, guys. I appreciate you very much. Thank you for all the likes. Thank you for all the love, all the gifts. I love you very much. So have a great night. Peace.